Hello, welcome. Hi, everybody. Happy Tuesday. I'm going to give this a few moments for people to come on and join us. Actually, I don't need these today. If somebody is here, if you could let me know whether you can hear me okay. Hi, Karen. Can you hear me okay? If somebody would let me know if you can hear me. I'm using a different microphone that should be working, but you never know. Good. Hello, Lindsay. Thank you. Thank you, Karen. So, how are you? You know, it's been, hi, Cheryl. Hi, Isabel. So, here we are a year later and still feeling like we're in the middle. Hi, Michelle. Hi, Natalie. Almost Portman. Thank you guys for letting me know that you can hear me okay. We are here a year into this, and I think most of us are certainly still feeling much of what it's created in our lives. But hopefully we will be coming through and kind of recreating what a new normal looks like for us. So I'm here to answer your questions. So whatever questions you have related to really kind of anything, I guess. Obviously, I can't answer questions around things that I don't really know, but you're free to ask anyway. And I'm happy to say that I don't know, so it won't make me feel bad. Ask me whatever questions you have. If there's something that's been on your mind, something that's felt like just a wondering or something you've been curious about. Do other people feel this way? Why does this happen? I used to be filled with questions like that, and actually still am, I guess, in lots of different arenas. I ask a lot of questions, which is maybe one of the reasons I love Q&A. But so I'm here to answer your questions. I'm here to really just kind of create the space for us to be together, to really feel, right, in our bodies that we're not alone, no matter what's going on. Maybe you're having a great day. Maybe you're having a really rough day. Maybe there have been a lot of really difficult things on your mind, or maybe you've been blissfully distracted. Wherever you're at, this is a space for us to come together and know that we're all here together. We're all in this together. And for probably anybody watching this, knowing that there are things that we also have in common, some similar struggles and experiences. So thank you all for being here. I'm a super worst case scenario type planner. Yeah, me too. Not so much now, but I definitely used to be. Not wonderful, but I had every intention of this going at least a year. No false hope. Yeah. Well, I have to say that I hoped that it wouldn't, and I was kind of feeling confident that it wouldn't. And now I'm just in it for the long haul, whatever that ends up being. Can you talk about false memory syndrome? My father became part of the movement years ago when I remembered that he sexually abused me. So false memory syndrome. This is definitely one of those things that you can ask different people and you'll have potentially different answers for everybody. So, and you will tend to hear different answers from somebody who really understands and works with trauma versus those that don't. So false memories, do they exist? Actually, I was going to say yes, but using that term, I don't like that term a whole lot, but is the idea of feeling like you remember something that didn't actually happen. Is that real? It can be. There are a lot of things that the way that our memory works may remember something a little bit differently. It can connect things maybe that weren't really connected, but in our mind they can be connected. Um, but that's not really what I would really consider a false memory. But the idea of false memories when it comes to sexual abuse, like childhood abuse, really generally, um, kind of came about in my, from my perspective, um, not believing that people could actually forget something so traumatic, so personal. And particularly at the time, on a conscious level, maybe that makes some sense. But when you really understand trauma and the way that our mind and our memory works, the way that our mind works ultimately, it actually doesn't seem that unreasonable. But that idea became mainstream because it felt better. Not only felt better to perpetrators, but it actually felt better in kind of a strange way to survivors. Because what do? We rationalize, we minimize, we deny the experience anyway, tell ourselves it wasn't really that, they didn't mean it, all of that. So, as a survivor, the idea that what you believe you remember isn't really true, while it can make you feel crazy, feeling crazy feels better than accepting that reality. So, it became something that people, I guess on all sides, felt like it's reasonable that that could happen. And it's likely that that happens because sexual abuse doesn't really happen. Fathers can never do those kinds of things to their daughters. But the reality is, when it comes to sexual abuse in particular, it's going to be incredibly, incredibly rare, and I would say it's really incredibly unlikely that somebody would feel that they have a memory of sexual abuse and it not be based in truth. There may be parts of it, like where you were, or the age that you were, how many times it happened. Those things can sometimes feel a little fuzzy, although sometimes they can be very clear. But the actual truth that you know in here that sexual abuse happened, you know that. And the idea that people remember something explicit like that that didn't really happen is really not at all likely to happen, to be the case. When the reason that people don't remember, like don't have clear memory, they don't remember it throughout their lives, and then will suddenly, or maybe not suddenly, maybe it happens over a period of time, but then start to have memories come back. That happens because you basically kind of open a door, because our mind works to shut that out. And sometimes it does that by literally making you not remember at all. Sometimes it's not quite that extreme, and you just don't think about it. You don't remember it in terms of it's something that plays out over and over. When somebody talks about abuse, you don't think about your own experience. It's shut away in a box, locked up on a shelf somewhere. And then when maybe you hear somebody talking about an experience, or you read something, you see something on television, the Me Too movement, it's like somebody bursts through that door. And it could be one tiny piece of memory, either visual, a sense, or in your body. Or it's possible that a lot of stuff could have come flooding back, especially if it's somebody that you had an ongoing relationship with. And it's very common in therapy when you're working on healing from trauma, childhood trauma, that people will have some memories. Like I know it happened, not doubt that whatsoever. But as you start working on healing and you start talking about some different things, you start remembering more. It's not that you blocked it out. It's not that your mind dissociated and you didn't know that it happened. It's just that it wasn't at the forefront of your mind. It wasn't a memory that continued to play out over time. But when you start opening yourself up, when you're no longer denying, rationalizing, minimizing, then you'll notice that things that you hadn't thought about, maybe really ever, or certainly not in a long time, you start remembering things like, oh yeah, I remember this time this happened. It's not that it's a false memory. It's not that you even had to shut it out because it was too traumatic. It's just that, especially when you have ongoing abuse, you can't remember everything. You can't remember every time. You can't remember every detail. It's impossible. There may be some things that are very, very clear for you, but that idea that even if you've had some memories, as you start working on it, new memories start to come up, kind of proves that you can go throughout your life and never have reason to have a memory pop in. But when you start opening yourself up, memories can start coming back. And again, might be just little pieces, little hints here and there. And sometimes there's a lot of stuff that comes back at once. The other thing is, even if you don't have like a visual memory or an idea, like a knowing in your mind that something happened, you can often know in your body that something happened. Like when you're around a particular person or around a particular place, you move away from the town that it happened and you come back and you don't feel right. Now, does that prove, like if you feel something in your body, that there was sexual abuse, if there's no other memories? No, but it certainly proves that there's something about that place that doesn't feel right, that your body is reacting to, that your body remembers. And over time, now that you've made that connection, over time, some things might coming up. Sometimes having a child or just knowing a child that is the age when your abuse started, or maybe a particular thing happened in your abuse that was more challenging. If you have a child that becomes that age, sometimes that's when memories can come back. There are all kinds of reasons why we can start remembering things. And certainly the fact that we can maybe remember things but never label it as abuse is another way that people will kind of argue, well, then it wasn't really abuse. Well, that's not true, because that's how we cope, is by not labeling it abuse, by doing everything we possibly can to not name it abuse or assault. Right? He touched me, he tickled me, he whatever, or she. So somebody who is an abuser, who claims that you have false memories, I think it's important to trust yourself, because we do know somebody making that up intentionally or otherwise, especially otherwise, both of them are incredibly rare, but especially making something up because you feel like you want to or you should, it just doesn't really happen. Is there a very rare occasion that that can happen? Well, yeah, anything is possible. But it just isn't what actually happens in reality. And if a perpetrator is saying it, then it's just a way to deflect and deny. It's like saying that you're crazy, that there's something wrong with you. Years ago, and maybe even sometimes now, they would lock people up for claiming things like that, especially if it was somebody well-known in the community, or a parent. Instead of dealing with the actual issue, they would blame the person saying that it happened and try to banish them somehow. And it's also not uncommon for, in fact, it's quite common for an abuser to somehow deny what it is. And false memory is a convenient scapegoat. Hi, Sharia. They are Sharia. It's the chakra system. And I actually ordered it on Etsy from a place actually here in Arizona, not too far from me. What do you think about lifespan integration as method therapy? Natalie, I am not sure exactly what you're referring to here. I don't, so there's different pieces to this that you might be referring to. But as an actual like lifespan integration, like cognitive behavioral or relational or DBT or something like that, I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to here. I suspect that it has something to do with like the idea of parts over developmental stages. But if you want to clarify. Part of me has enjoyed the peace of lockdown. Yeah, I think that's true for a lot of people. I've not had to see my family, not had to spend Christmas with them. Yep, now we're coming out soon, so I'm feeling anxious about having to deal with others again. You know, this is something that I'm hearing from a lot of people, and it has been kind of a reprieve, right? That you've not had to make excuses or had to deal with things. Recognizing that difference for yourself. So if you are somebody who has recognized that not engaging so much with people that don't fill you up, if you are somebody who goes out a lot because you feel like you should be social, but you don't really want to, and you're recognizing, I feel so much better not feeling like I have to go out all the time. This is an important thing to really recognize and to honor with yourself. If there are pieces that you've been able to recognize that you actually feel better by not engaging in certain things, I think it's important for you to consider, how do I keep doing that? How do I incorporate that into my life beyond COVID? How do I, if interacting with my family creates a lot of distress for me, then how do I minimize that? Or how do I not do that, not engage in that, because it just doesn't feel good to me? And you can. It's not easy, but you can. And if it's just that creates some anxiety, but it turns out okay, what can I do? If I know that this doesn't feel good to me, what can I do to help mitigate some of that anxiety, some of that feeling that comes up? And maybe there are some things. Maybe you don't interact with a particular person. Maybe you do a lot of self-care before and after. So there are some different things that you can do, but take that as an important awareness for healing and self-care. And then what can you do to minimize those experiences? If you went out all the time, but you didn't really enjoy it, and you recognize that, you know what, I don't want to go out all the time, then being honest and don't go out. Maybe invite somebody to your house and just be like one-on-one, or have a couple of people over so it's not a big group. That's perfectly okay. And a lot of people are recognizing that not being always engaged all the time, socially or outwardly, kind of feels nice in some ways, even if it can feel isolating and lonely, which you want to balance that. But a lot of people are recognizing that much of that was a lack of boundaries or distraction to not deal with things that they didn't want to deal with. Would you like to talk about mother-daughter sexual abuse and what it is? Why is it so taboo? This is a great question, Natalie. So mother-daughter sexual abuse in particular. So I think the idea of mothers abusing their children, male or female, is quite shocking to a lot of people. And it can create a lot of myths and misunderstandings and shame. It's a layer of shame, not that other people don't have shame, but it's certainly a different layer of shame that can be there. Not shame that is deserved, but shame that can be there. So mother-daughter abuse in particular is very real. It absolutely happens, but it is far less talked about because of that shame, because of the stigma attached to it, because of the idea of what you shared, that it is taboo. The reason that it's kind of a difficult thing for people to acknowledge and talk about is, one, that people don't talk about it, so that makes it harder for other people to talk about it. But we have this idea pretty much across all cultures that we look at mothers differently than we look at fathers or anybody else, really, but we look at them differently, right? When we think of a father, we have a certain idea. When we think of a mother, we have a different idea. And when we think of mothers, part of the difficulty is that we equate sexual abuse with sex, and mothers aren't supposed to be sexual. Fathers are supposed to be sexual, and if you equate sexual abuse with sex, then it seems kind of to make a little bit more sense. But sexual abuse is not about sex. But that's a different thing. I'm not going to get onto that right now. But so when we think about mothers, we hold them in a very different place. And when we think about a mother abusing her child, we have an idea of what that must mean about that relationship. And if there's a problem in that relationship, if there's some sort of like disconnect in that relationship, then what does it say about the child? We as survivors can say, what does it say about me? People can say, what does it say about the mother? But because so many people are mothers, and we have mothers, we often don't want to look at the mother as the potential problem. So instead, societally, we can say, oh, that doesn't really happen. We don't want to accept that a mother in particular can do that to a child. We don't really want to accept that a father can do that either, but we've come to accept that that is possible. But when it comes to a mother, we as a society really feel very uncomfortable with that. We don't want to accept that that can happen. And part of that is our own internal need to self-protect against that idea. But part of it is also, what do you do then? Right? What do you do if a mother can be sexually abusive? Who can a child be safe with? How do we know? What happens? Can a child be okay? Because again, we tend to look at sexual abuse as a sex act, and it's not. But again, if we look at it with a male, it can look different than if we look at it from a female, especially a mother. And because of that idea of taboo and the fact that people don't talk about it, it really can create a lot more shame. In general, having an abuser that is the same gender creates a separate type of shame as well, like another layer of shame that is there, which is, again, is kind of based in myth, but it's an idea that society has about what sexual abuse is. because again, it's seen as sex. And even survivors who are abused by a same gendered person struggle with that. Well, am I gay? Did they pick up on something? What does that say about me? So again, it adds layers there. I would say that mother's sexual abuse is the least or the most underreported, I guess is a better way to say that, because of the shame that's attached to it. And not only the shame that's attached to it, but the lack of ability as a survivor to name that what happened was in fact sexual abuse. Because we can't allow ourselves to see it as that. We have difficulty with that with other perpetrators too. But when it comes to a mother in particular, both for male and female children, it is incredibly challenging. Even accepting that a mother can be abusive in any way is quite challenging for society as well as for ourselves. Because we don't want to accept that a mother can do that. And the truth is that there are times that mothers are the most significant abusers for people. And sometimes that is sexual, and sometimes it is psychological or physical. And that abuse by our mothers, that level of betrayal can feel even more significant than a father. I'm not saying it actually is, in reality, more significant, but it can feel that way because of the expectations that we have for mothers versus fathers. Because of the ideas of what a mother is supposed to be. So there are a lot of factors that go into it, and healing that trauma is incredibly challenging. Even when I talk with people who have been abused by somebody in the family or somebody close to the family, and mom maybe did know, or you're not sure if she knew, or you told her and she didn't believe you, or she didn't do anything about it, healing that betrayal often takes a lot more work than healing the betrayal of the abuse, the sexual abuse itself. Again, because it's with the mother, and that type of betrayal can feel so incredibly profound. So incredibly profound. And especially if she was your primary caretaker. So I hope that helped, Natalie. If not, please feel free to share more. I have no conscious memory of sexual abuse, but I have some body PTSD and strange hypersexual behaviors as a child. So, Crystal, those are certainly some of the things that are present for somebody who has been abused. And wanting to remember is also something that is very, very present for people who don't really remember. And there are different reasons for that. It's important to recognize, though, that you do not have to remember anything specific in order to be able to heal. And I think I've done a video on that. Sorry, I don't remember what the video is exactly. I think it had something to do with, do you have to have clear memories or something like that? But I talk about that in that video. So if you haven't seen that, that might be helpful to watch. But that struggle with wanting or feeling the need to remember can be an incredibly heavy thing to carry. Last Christmas was the favorite one because it was slow, yeah. Which people would stay 6 feet away. Do you have any suggestions for how to grieve someone you lost who is still alive, but no longer the person you loved and not in your life anymore? This is grieving somebody who is alive can in many ways be much more challenging than grieving somebody who is not. Now, obviously, that has its own challenges that are not present when somebody is alive, but there can be a lot of very different types of challenging aspects to grieving somebody who is. So I think one of the most important things is being able to really honor how you feel, honoring why that relationship needs to end, if it in fact needs to end, and for whatever reason, whether it's you or them ending it, but really honoring what that means, that it's ended. And not just what it means for right now, but the reality is that part of grief is about thinking about the future, right? So being able to really honor what that loss means, the sadness, if it's over something that is because there's an unhealthy piece that's present, being able to feel the anger and the frustration, the disappointment that might be there. But this is something that a lot of people struggle with, because as you become healthier and you start setting boundaries, for many people, the reality is that there will be people that you've had in your life that you will recognize because they're not able to respect and honor your boundaries. There will be people that you no longer have relationships with, or the relationship is quite diminished in some capacities. And so it is a natural thing for relationships to shift fairly significantly. And part of being able to set and maintain those boundaries is allowing yourself to grieve what it means for that relationship to shift so significantly or potentially end. But I think honoring that reality, much of it is very similar to grieving somebody that has died. When you recognize that they are alive, obviously there are going to be thoughts of, why can't they do this, or why can't they do that? And recognize that that's there. It's okay to wish that something could be different, but then recognizing that you have no control over that, and the ending of that relationship is ultimately going to be in your best interest, even if they're the one ending it. Because if they're ending a relationship and that doesn't make any sense to you, you don't understand, or whatever, it doesn't feel good. If they're ending a relationship, then if they were to continue that relationship with you, it likely wouldn't be very healthy. So it's still going to be something that you grieve and miss potentially, but it is likely going to be, in the bigger picture, something that is likely going to be for the best. And grieving somebody who is still alive is something that a lot of people over the last year, well, throughout eternity probably, but particularly in this last year, last handful of years, has been something that a lot of people have been doing, including myself, kind of recognizing how relationships are a little different than what I thought, and going through a process of grieving that reality. I've worked on this issue in terms of false memory with therapy and meditation for many years, but my mind still has trouble accepting this. When I can't accept that the abuse happened, I have deep self-hatred. Yes. And my memory is from when I was a toddler. And that self-hatred in part is because you're not trusting yourself. If we don't trust ourselves, it impacts so many different things. So maybe, and maybe you've done this, but one of the things that you might kind of consider with therapy is, certainly honoring and recognizing that part, but also kind of creating some opportunity to focus on the idea of self-trust, not specifically just around memories, though that can certainly be a part of it, but the idea of actually really trusting yourself generally. Because if you're able to do that kind of in a general sense, it will, especially if you're consciously recognizing that there's a connection there, it can help with some of that. The thing about healing childhood trauma is that it's not just about the trauma, right? The long-term impact is the meaning that we attach to it and the ways that we reinforce it year after year after year. So obviously it starts with the trauma, or the trauma is a significant part of it, but there's so many other ways that we have been impacted. And like shame, for example, we can heal shame around sexual abuse without having to focus specifically on shame around sexual abuse. We can work on shame kind of as a general idea, and shame that comes up day to day and in doing that, you're also healing some of the shame about the abuse. So I'm not saying you should or you shouldn't talk about abuse. In fact, sometimes you need to talk about that. But there are ways to heal some pieces without having specifically to talk about it. And self-trust, because self-trust can show up in so many, or a lack of self-trust can show up in so many different ways. We can work on self-trust without having to specifically focus on every piece of mistrust that we have with ourselves, if that makes sense. Is it normal to suffer from body memory issues, PTSD, around the time the abuse started? I'm starting to think every year around this time it starts for me. Absolutely, Shreya. Absolutely, especially when if there's a piece that isn't really conscious. So like if the anniversary comes around and you're not really aware that it's an anniversary, or if there are pieces that you maybe don't want to think about or try not to think about, it's much more likely to show up in our body. But even if you are actively working on things, because your body has gotten accustomed to that, it can continue to show up. And that is a very real thing, because your body doesn't think, it just responds, right? And part of what it can respond to is even daylight. So when there's more daylight versus less daylight. So when the days start getting shorter, that can actually be a trigger for people. The smells seasonally around you can definitely be a trigger. Temperature can be a trigger. Music, like if there's music associated. So there's lots of different ways that we can be triggered without having any conscious connection to it. But that's good information to have, being able to recognize that, and then being able to do some work on creating safety in your body and in your surroundings by doing some grounding and conscious work to remind yourself that in this time and space, you're safe. Hi, Jack. Have not heard actually even, I don't think, of the film Moxie. But I'm curious. Hi, Fred. Oh, this thing just all of a sudden skipped somewhere. I am 44, and 44. My gosh, I can't speak today, and I still struggle with this topic of my childhood. Well, you're very welcome. And we continue to struggle. It takes time to really get to that work. And I think that, I've worked with a lot of people, I've talked to a lot of people who will say, I've been doing this work for 20 years, 30 years, 10 years, whatever it is, and will feel bad. Like, I've done this work for so long and I don't feel like I've really made any progress. And First of all, I would say that I doubt it's true that you've not made any progress, maybe not made the progress you wanted to make, but I'm sure that there have been some subtle shifts at least. But one of the things that is very real is that people will start working on something in whatever way that might look for them, whether it's with therapy or self-help. But even in therapy, sometimes when people are starting, especially, they're not really working at the core wounding, working on healing the core wounding. They might be, in fact, a lot of therapy focuses on symptoms. And that can be beneficial. It's not that you wasted that time, but oftentimes, especially if you go back a ways, therapy often focused on symptom reduction. In fact, a lot of people didn't believe that you could heal from sexual abuse. A lot of people still don't think that. But the focus was a little bit different. People didn't acknowledge that they were sexually abused. So of course, if you're not acknowledging that you were sexually abused, then you can't really heal it. So when you think about how long you've been working on healing, it's important to really honor what that really means. Because there are stages to healing. And there are times when where you are at, there may only be a certain level that you're able to take in. And that might have to do with the way that the therapy is going. It may have to do with where you're at and what's going on around you. If you're really young, like before 22, 23 years old, then your brain isn't even fully developed. And so you can do an aspect of healing for sure, but then there's likely going to be more healing that you do a little bit later. Doesn't mean you shouldn't start then. The earlier you start, the better, because then there's less years of reinforcing all of that stuff. But it's important to recognize that so that you don't beat yourself up and feel ashamed of not being where you think that you should be. That made a lot of sense. I am not going to spend next Christmas at my mother's house where a lot of my abuse took place. I'm going to be honest and say so. They won't like it, but that's okay. Yes, yay! Good for you. And I want to say this not just to you, Michelle, because I know there are going to be other people that can relate to this. So good for you for just allowing yourself to say, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. That's huge. That is huge. So I want to say this just so that you have it in the back of your mind, and anybody else does too who may be listening to this. What can happen sometimes is that as it gets closer, some of this motivation and inspiration and resolve that can be present in this moment can wane a little bit. And you might feel a little less sure. You might start doubting yourself. You might start feeling bad or guilty. That happens a lot. And that's a fairly normal thing to have happen. So what I want you to remember, and again, this is for anybody who finds themselves in this kind of situation when you're wanting to set a boundary. Whether you are able to follow through with it has no bearing on you in the moment that you make a decision to take care of you. That's a huge moment. That is a huge healing moment. No matter what happens 9 months from now or however long from now. I hope that you're able to do that. I hope that you're able to honor yourself and really take care of what you need and set that boundary. I really hope that you're able to do it. And I have no reason to suspect that you won't. But if you find yourself struggling with following through, or anybody else listening to this, if you've in your mind said, okay, I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to say no. I'm not going to put myself in that situation. I know I did that a lot, and I know a lot of you do too. And then you find yourself faced with it and you end up doing it. And then you feel bad. You feel weak. You feel ashamed because you weren't going to do it and you did it anyway. That is a normal part of healing. It is a normal process of learning to set boundaries, of learning to honor yourself. You first have to start with, I'm not going to do it. I'm not doing that again. If you don't have that moment, you're never going to even think about setting a boundary. So honor that you had that moment. And the more that you can honor it between now and then, actually, the more likely you are to follow through with it. So again, good for you. Celebrate that. Like, honestly, really, for any of you, when you have that moment of awareness and say, I am not doing that again. I'm not going to let somebody take advantage of me. I'm not going to put everybody before myself. That's a huge win in that moment, no matter what you do tomorrow or 9 months from now. Allowing the space for that to be present is huge. If you think about it, that probably hasn't happened a whole lot, right? Boundaries are not an easy thing. Boundaries are incredibly challenging, which is why so many people struggle with them, which is why I did a course on boundaries. But good for you, and I will be cheering you on. The way you explain a lot of things is very powerful, but it made me really emotional when you were talking about mother-daughter abuse. I've never heard people talk about it before. Exactly, Jack. That's kind of, I think, what Natalie was feeling into a little bit. It's not talked about, and I'm just thinking about maybe I should talk about that more. I mean, I talk about it when it comes up, but I don't necessarily make a specific effort to talk about it. But it is definitely a very real thing. And I think mother abuse in general can take on a lot of forms that is important for us to be able to acknowledge. Neglect even. So it's very significant. I don't know what lifespan integration is. Okay, it is the form they use at WANSA, World of No Sexual Abuse. I've not heard of that either, but it's very interesting. I must say I'm curious about that. So I'm actually going to make a little note here. World of No Sexual Abuse. So it may be something similar that I am a little bit more familiar with, but I might just call it something different, which would not be unusual. My mother was all of those abusers, sexual, emotional, and neglectful, along with narcissistic tendencies. It's been a long, hard road once I began to remember and work on the trauma. Yes, Radha, thank you for sharing that. Mothers, the like verbal, emotional, psychological abuse that we can experience with our moms can be, can feel so incredibly impactful. Again, because of that caretaker idea, even if she's not our primary caretaker, we have an idea that that's the mothers at this point in our history anyway. Hopefully that will change as time goes on. But the idea of her as our primary caretaker, and so it can feel, that betrayal feels a little bit more layered, complex, I guess I would say. In fact, and I've said this many times, mother-daughter relationships are the most complex relationships we have in a family system. Actually, I guess I would say in general, but in a family system, mother-daughter specifically is the most complex. So inherently, there's already some challenges there. Oh, good, Crystal, I'm glad. You're very welcome, Natalie. And there really is more that we could probably talk about with that, for sure. Can you explain more about mothers? If things that men do isn't sex, if a mother hurts those areas of the body in a different way, how do you know if it is abuse or not? Well, if a mother hurts those areas of a body in any way, I would say that that's probably abuse. Like if it's accidental, like if she's bathing you or something and it's accidental, then it's not, then I would say it's probably not abuse because it's accidental. Well, if it's accidental, it's not abuse. I guess I can say that. But if there's, certainly if it's an intentional way to hurt you in some way, in any, like hurt you in any way, then it's abuse. And if it happens to be in any sort of sexual organ, then sexual area, genitalia, then that is considered sexual abuse. I'm thinking, is there any exception to that? And I don't, there's not. I really can't think of anything that would be an exception to that. And even when sex is a part of the abuse, so something that you might choose to do with a partner later on down the road is a part of your abuse experience, sex is the tool, the sexual act, the sexual behavior is the tool that's being used. And mothers can do that just as much as a male can. It might look a little bit different, but it absolutely can still be there. So I hope that makes sense, Isabel. Oh, good, Radana. So here's an example. So somebody commented about self-hatred. And as I talked about that, it helped somebody else see something, recognize something that was helpful. See, that's why this is important. Today it is End Incest Day, a translation in Sweden. Is it that in the rest of the world? Not here. I've never actually heard of that. That would be a good thing to recognize. Here in the US, the only thing that we really have is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And unfortunately, it gets very little attention. It's actually next month, but it gets very little attention. Let's see. The moment we make a decision, yes, that really is a huge thing. Is there ever a point in healing where things don't feel like you're spending every minute of the day trying to get through it? Is it ever easy again? Whew. Yes. Yes. And I want to say a little bit more about that, though. Healing ultimately means that you get to that point, that you get to a point where every day isn't just about getting through it, that every day isn't just about surviving and looking forward to ending your day so that it's over. That's what healing means. It means being able to go through your days, even when there's some struggle, going through your days, feeling assured in your heart and in your body that you're going to be okay. That even when there is pain that is there, that tomorrow or a few days from now, it will feel better. Trusting that that is true. Again, healing doesn't mean that you never struggle again. certainly doesn't mean that things are perfect. Healing means that you trust within yourself, that you have released, that you've healed, and therefore released the burden, the shame, the uncertainty. It means that you get to a place where you're able to feel that freedom and lightness. And even when challenging things come up, they can be hard. You might struggle a little bit, but you struggle from a place of knowing that you're still worthy, that struggle isn't weakness, that not only is it okay to reach out for support, but that it's important to do that, that you want that, and it's okay to want that. It's healthy to want that. You feel a sense of trust within yourself that you are okay. You don't question, you don't doubt, not regularly anyway. Doesn't mean that you don't have moments, but it's short-lived. So to your question, do you get to a point where you don't feel like you're spending every minute of the day just trying to get through it? Absolutely. It's not easy. You can't do it alone. And it takes time, practice, and patience. But you do, and you can. But it is important to have the right help. It's important, imperative to have patience, because you will feel like you have days that you're doing so much better. And naturally, as part of the process, you will struggle again. And when you struggle again, you will feel defeated. You might feel hopeless. You might feel like it's never available to you. But that is not true. It makes sense that you feel that way because you've allowed yourself to come up. And so when you struggle again, it feels like you have further to fall. But that's not falling. That's a natural part of the process of healing. When you come back down here, you practice what you've learned. You practice reaching out for support. And when you practice reaching out for support, you retrain your nervous system to know that it's okay to do that. And that's healing. You need to be able to experience that in order to be able to go through all those ups and downs and get to that summit. But it does happen. And you don't even have to be completely at the summit to have weeks where you can feel that sense of freedom. Is it ever easy again? Well, things can be easy, but the reality is life is hard, right? Life is filled with disappointment. It's natural. We're going to have disappointment. We're going to have grief. We're going to have moments that we desire something, but we don't go after it. We're going to face situations, hopefully never in our lifetime again, of a global pandemic or something really difficult that comes our way that's going to be challenging. So do we get to a place where life is always easy? No. But that's the reality of living. There will be challenges. There will be struggles. We just experience them in a very different way. Sex as self-injury. So this can mean a couple of different things. Not only, so it can mean literally doing it as a way of kind of self-harm. So it could end up being painful or dangerous. Or it can be kind of like a unhealthy coping mechanism. So, or potentially something else. So if you have a sense of maybe what direction there, if you want to add, let me know kind of what you might be thinking a little bit more specifically. I might be able to address it a little bit better. And I'm happy to do that. I know that it gets worse before it gets better, saying is a thing, but dang, it's harder than I prepared for. Yeah, I think most people who do this thing called healing kind of recognize that. But it's important to recognize why that is the case. Up until you make a decision to start healing, you have been coping. And our coping mechanisms, even if not healthy, even if they're not serving us well, do a pretty good job at keeping us disconnected from all this stuff over here. Even if we might struggle a lot with anxiety or even panic attacks or whatever, we don't feel the connection to all this stuff over here. So when you start healing, it can almost feel like you're opening a door to something that you could have kept that door closed on forever. But like I just said, you're still struggling, right? In potentially myriad ways, you're still struggling. You just don't know why you're struggling, or you chalk it up to something else. So the struggle is generally still there. You're just not kind of connecting those dots. And yes, the struggle might feel different depending on how you've coped, and it can feel a lot more challenging in some ways, which is hard because that can make people want to quit. Like, what the hell am I doing? I was doing better before. But one of the things that is important to keep in mind when you're healing is reminding yourself that you're not doing it alone. Reminding yourself that you have support. Reminding yourself that what you're feeling isn't going to be there forever. That what you're doing is facing everything that you have tried to keep far, far away. That doesn't make it necessarily feel easier, but it can be a helpful reminder so it doesn't feel quite as uncertain as you're moving through the process. Advice for healing attachment trauma. This is a very, attachment trauma is very complex. There's so many different pieces that go into it. This is definitely one of the things, so specifically around attachment trauma, in order to heal attachment trauma, we have to be in relationship, deliberately working on healing attachment trauma. Now, that doesn't mean that every conversation has to be about attachment trauma. Like, you don't have to talk about attachment trauma specifically, but you can only heal relationship trauma, and that's any sort of abuse, interpersonal trauma. You can only heal that in the context of a healing relationship, of a healthy healing relationship. So that's the first thing that I would say. I think understanding the complexity of what attachment trauma is, and I don't mean that you need to get a degree in psychology or anything like that, but understanding what attachment trauma is, the ways that it has specifically impacted you, how it shows up in your life, how it shows up in the context of relationships, isolation, withdrawal, feeling really intensely attached versus intensely detached, like being able to recognize all the ways that it shows up for you in various types of relationships or situations, and then healing that. And really, so much of healing attachment trauma is the relationship that you have. It's kind of resetting your system to understand that relationships can be safe and healthy. And this is definitely something that takes time. It takes a lot of time and intentional effort to be able to heal. And any abuse by somebody that you have any sort of relationship with, any type of abuse with any type of relationship, is going to create attachment trauma, without a doubt. And betrayal trauma is attachment trauma as well. Those two things go together. In therapy, I find it really difficult when we work on coping with uncertainty. I always want to ask if things are okay. Is this common, and are there ways to make it more manageable? It is very common. It's very common, both kind of in the therapy setting, wanting to be reassured that things are okay. And it's also really common to struggle with uncertainty. And that can actually be true for people that don't even have like abuse histories. So it is really common. Is there a way to make it more manageable? I think that having that recognition, like first bringing that into awareness, that that is a struggle, that there is this need for things to know that things are okay. The other thing is being able to recognize that even when you're not certain that things are okay, that just by time and experience, you realize that they were okay. So recognizing a time that you felt like you weren't sure about something, whatever that might be, and then recognizing whether it was 10 minutes later or 10 days later, recognizing that, oh, I felt really uncertain about that. I was really panicked about it. I felt really scared. I felt really depressed, whatever it is, because I wasn't sure about it. But it turned out that it was okay, even if it was never specifically addressed or identified that it was okay, but just realizing that whatever fear you had didn't come to fruition, that things worked out okay. So being able to remind yourself that even when you are not assured that everything is okay, things are still okay. That can help ease some of that need to know, because it's reinforced then that me knowing it's okay is why it's okay. But in reality, it's okay because it would have been okay anyway. Because generally speaking, as adults, the things that we fear happening don't actually end up happening. Again, it's a general statement, but when it comes to the things that we fear happening, very rarely do those things actually end up happening. So just kind of reminding yourself of that, reminding your mind and your body that there have been many times that you felt uncertain about something, but it worked out just fine, and maybe even great. Tough topics. Would you mind doing something for feeling safe, please, at the end? Let me make a note of that, so I will try to remember, even if it's just a very brief thing at the end. Do you think that pity sex is a form of self-injury? I mean, to sleep with or interact sexual with someone that you are not attracted to, but because you feel sorry for someone. Is that a form of self-injury? I think you can absolutely say that it is a form of self-injury. That's probably not the way that I would say it, but I think that that is a very valid way of saying it. Actually, yeah, I might say actually self-harming or self-sabotaging, but it all kind of is the same thing. But absolutely, especially when you are healing from some sort of sexual trauma, because when you do that, you are reinforcing, even if not consciously, so you definitely don't have to be thinking this, but when you have sex with somebody that you don't really want to have sex with, or when you have sex and you actually really don't want to have sex, and this is true for anybody, if you are doing that and you have a history of sexual trauma, you are reinforcing that that is your value. You're reinforcing that you don't matter. And again, most of the time, that's not happening on a conscious level. And anything that happens behind our consciousness has even more impact on us because it's going straight into our system. When we have an idea consciously and we can be aware of it, we can do something to kind of mitigate its impact. When we don't have a conscious awareness of it, then it just goes directly into reinforcing what we already believe. So yes, I would say that sex, any sort of sexual activity that you are having because you feel an obligation, like really think about that. How familiar does that feel? I'm not suggesting that abuse was you choosing something out of obligation. I'm not saying that at all. Far from that. But that idea that we don't really get to make a choice, that we don't get to make a choice based on what we want, that it's about somebody else and what they want or need. That feels familiar when you've had sexual trauma. So it is self-injurious for sure. Aries Nation, it doesn't get better. I'm not sure exactly what you're speaking to, but if you're talking about the struggle with abuse or trauma, the reality is it doesn't get better for a lot of people because they don't have support or the right type of support to help them get through it. So it is unfortunate that a lot of people go through their entire lives continuing to struggle with the impact of trauma. A lot of people do. But it doesn't have to be that way if you can get the right type of support. Yes, Jack. A retreat someday, yes. My friend has not been doing well lately, and she keeps telling me she just wants to give up. I'm not sure what else to tell her than what I already have. Lindsay, for any of us, we cannot be responsible for somebody else, kind of period. We just can't. We can be there to support somebody, but we can't choose for them. We can encourage people to get help, but we can't make them receive it. And I know that this is incredibly difficult, but we can't make those choices for somebody else. We can just let them know what we think, what we feel. Let them know that if they are struggling, that they can reach out if that feels like something you can do. But we can't change how they feel. Even therapists can't do that for somebody else. And that can be frustrating. A lot of therapists have really struggled with that. I'm very fortunate that, however, I don't even know how, but I was able to recognize that very early on in my work. Maybe because I had, in the work that I have worked with a lot of people who were suicidal, and recognizing that, and I'm making an assumption there that that's what you're talking about. Maybe you're talking about giving up. Well, maybe you're actually just talking about healing. I'm not sure, but either one, you can't make that decision for her. And when it comes to healing, even from depression, people have to be ready. They have to be ready, and we can't make them ready. You're welcome. Satori Sensei, I like that. So the idea of sex as a form of self-injury Why do people do that? And also as a coping mechanism, how is it working as a coping mechanism? It can be a way to distract from what else might be going on in terms of a coping mechanism. And people do it because we do things that reinforce what we already believe about ourselves. We do things and put ourselves in situations that reinforce what we believe about who we are. So if we believe that that we're not smart, for example, we're not going to try very hard. And I can speak to this from personal experience. If you believe that you're not smart, you're likely not going to try very hard, because why try hard if you're not going to do well anyway? Why try hard and not do well and be proven that you really aren't smart? So if you believe that your only value is your body, then you continue to put yourself in situations. Not everybody does this, but for some people, you can continue then to put yourself in situations, and I, again, was one of these people, put yourself in situations that reaffirms that that's what your value is. In fact, if somebody isn't respectful, or if somebody is respectful of your body and your boundaries, and somebody doesn't try to make you feel guilty or push you into doing something you don't want to do, that can feel really unsettling because it's not what you're used to. It can feel a little dangerous, actually. I also have experienced that. And so we do things to reinforce that. We pick partners, we pick friends that reinforce what we believe about who we are. We tend to avoid people who reflect back to us something that is positive because it doesn't feel comfortable. And there's certainly a lot more that I could talk about with that, but that is a natural thing that happens. And part of the reason why we believe so strongly what we believe, because there are situations that we can choose consciously or not, because a lot of it is not conscious. We can choose situations where we have sex when we don't want to reinforce those ideas, or not set a boundary to reinforce an idea. You're very welcome, Jack. Okay, so it was suicidal. That was the assumption that I made. The other thing, Lindsay, is if there is somebody that you believe is about, like actually there's a plan in place and you are very concerned about their actual safety in that moment, it's different depending on where you live, but every area in the US anyway, has a number that you can call, 911. It would be one, but there's actually usually a different number specifically to an organization that you can call, and they will send somebody out to that person. I know that can feel like it's a huge boundary issue, but that is something that can be done. The urge to needing to have sex after a body memory, but not sure if it's a body memory. That can be a way to reinforce some of that too. And this is part of the reason why healing from sexual trauma and childhood trauma kind of more generally, but especially sexual trauma, is so hard to do, because it is such a complex experience. It creates so many different layers of wounding and how it shows up in us in the world, and how we cope with it and don't cope with it, and how that shifts over time for various reasons. There's nothing about healing. There's nothing about the impact. There's nothing about healing that is easy, which is part of the reason why not a lot of people have really been able to do it, mostly because professionals don't really understand. And absolutely, there are a lot of people out there that do, but I'm speaking generally globally, that there are a lot of professionals that really don't understand what that means, because the idea is symptom reduction. And symptom reduction is not healing. kind of like medication. Medication can serve an important purpose, but medication is not going to heal anything. So if you just take medication, whatever you were struggling with before the medication, you're going to struggle with again when you stop taking the medication, unless you've done work on healing something. So even like if you think about the idea of DBT skills or dialectical behavioral therapy skills, right? So it's a system of skills that you learn to help regulate behavior and energy. So it's things that you learn to help with symptom reduction, reactivity, which is important. That's an important thing to learn. But it's a part of it that goes a long way in helping how you feel in your body and not reacting and calming how you respond to things. It helps a lot in that. But if you're not also doing the work of why are you struggling in that way to begin with, then you're not actually healing anything. So healing is almost like this crazy maze that there are many ways to get to where you need to get to. And there's no clear path, but with the right guidance, you can find your way there. And finding the right guidance, I know, is not an easy thing to do. With online therapy, it can be a little bit easier to find people. And again, I often recommend a rape crisis center because they have very specific training in sexual trauma, where a lot of people, a lot of therapists may be trained and be great as a therapist generally or in some specific areas, but if they don't have a solid understanding, specialization in working with sexual trauma, then they don't understand all the nuance to what that really means. And trauma-informed is not the same as trauma specialization or trauma expert. And nobody that is not clinically trained when it comes to mental health is a trauma expert. That's a bold statement. And I'm probably, if there are certain people that hear that, it's probably not going to make them happy. But I believe that. There's a lot happening in the online world around trauma experts and trauma healing, and everybody's trauma informed now. That's not what you're looking for. You're looking for a trained, clinically trained mental health person, therapist. One of those other people can help with symptoms. They can help you have some understanding. They can certainly be there to support you, but they do not have the level of understanding that is necessary for the deep core wound healing that needs to happen. Okay, I'm going to get off that little soapbox there. Can someone bleed from having flashbacks? So I'm not going to say absolutely not. I would say generally from a flashback itself, that's not likely to happen. Now, something could happen within a flashback that may cause bleeding. So something could happen that you're maybe unaware of if you're really in the flashback that can create bleeding. There can be some other pieces that might happen kind of energetically that could cause a release of blood. So I don't know if you're talking about like an injury or more like what feels like period bleeding. But typically a flashback is not going to cause that unless there's something else there going on. Okay, another little mark for a podcast. I will keep everybody informed. I'm drinking again, and I probably shouldn't be. If drinking is a way to distract, deny, deflect, dissociate, minimize, then I would say that drinking is probably not good. Anything that we do, well, especially drinking, because that can become a significant problem. But anything that we do to deny or avoid is potentially problematic. Sex actually can be one of those things. Going back to the idea of coping, anything that we do like that is not generally a healthy thing at all. Having a glass of wine or a beer at the end of the day, as long as you're not trying to not feel something, generally speaking, is okay. But doing it because you're feeling like you need it to feel okay, that's an important thing to really recognize and work to come up with another way of being able to manage that. I feel very happy that I dared to ask the question because I didn't know how. I mean, I didn't know how to express myself. I feel very safe here. Yes, Natalie, I am so glad to hear that. I am so glad to hear that. And I know that there are other people who are going to hear this, whether it's live or on the replay, who feel exactly the same way and have held back from asking. I am so glad that you asked. And for anybody watching this, and for you too, Natalie, you said here that you didn't know how to express yourself. And there were things that you asked, and I asked or said that I wasn't quite sure what you were asking, or I asked maybe for clarification. And sometimes that can cause somebody to feel like, oh my God, I knew I shouldn't have asked. I'm so glad that you did, and that people are getting to experience, and you too, Natalie, that you're getting to experience that you can ask a question. And even if I don't understand exactly what you're saying, or if I ask for clarification, it doesn't mean you've done it in a wrong way. It just means that I want to be sure that what I'm responding to is what you mean for me to respond to. And I know sometimes people feel like if I ask for clarification, that it can bring up a lot of anxiety or fear that, oh, I got it wrong, I didn't ask the right thing, or I didn't ask it in the right way. Absolutely not. I'm so glad that you feel safe here. Isn't this amazing that people from all over the world can be in this space right here? And who knows who's going to watch this on replay. But in this moment, right here, right now, that people from all over can be here and ask questions, share things, and create a sense of feeling safe. Create a sense of feeling that you're not alone. Maybe even that you're understood. Maybe hopeful. We have created that here today. We did that just by being here, just by sharing, by being vulnerable, by having your energy be present. We did that. Makes me a little emotional. So right, that treating symptoms is not enough. I realize that. The counselor I'm with now is a survivor and past nurse and is working on belief issues and knows about body memory. A start for me, very important. I'm so glad that you have somebody that you feel understands it at a deeper level. That is incredibly important. Hi, Maria. Oh, thank you. The ASMR, somebody mentioned that quite a while ago, and I had no idea what that was, but I looked it up. If I do a podcast, I'm going to have part of that, I think, is going to be some meditations. So some aspects of some of that ASMR stuff. Well, I'm seeing some people that are new to me. Welcome, everybody. You're very welcome. Thank you for being here and being a part of this community. Well, thank you, Jules, of being a teacher. Teachers, that's certainly all kinds of teachers. So there's teachers that have an education and get paid to teach, and then there's other kinds of teachers, but teachers are, I think, very undervalued. And fortunately, one of the things that has happened from COVID is the recognition of how important teachers are. I don't know if that's the kind of teacher you are or not, but either way. I'm working on self-discipline and self-healing, self-sex addiction in oneself because of childhood sexual abuse. I will discuss this with my counselor. Good for you. Okay, so it's been an hour and a half, guys. So a couple of things. Right now, the live Q&As were scheduled just for this through this month. I am going to take a look at how does this feel to you? So for those of you here, or if you're watching this on replay, feel free to share in the comments. How is a live Q&A? Is it something that you feel is really helpful? Does it feel like it's more helpful for me to do just videos that I share with you? Does it feel helpful to have a little of both? Because I haven't actually shared a video, I don't think, since I started the live Q&As last month. I love your feedback. I enjoy the live Q&As, but I also know that doing the live Q&As also doesn't, that I'm not maybe going to do other kinds of videos as much. And then there's a potential podcast. So if I do a podcast, I am planning to also share it here on the YouTube channel. It probably won't have video, it will just be audio, but I will share it and upload it here to YouTube as well. So feel free to share your thoughts about that. I feel like there was something else I was going to say, but I don't remember what that was. Marion, I am grateful for you to be here as well. Love the Q&A. A middle school teacher, yes. Yeah, I can't imagine trying to be a teacher. Well, maybe at all. I had thought about being a teacher at one point, but especially at this time, being a teacher would be incredibly challenging. Definitely do the live Q&A, more interactive for you, and we get to share our stories and get advice. Well, thank you, Automator. I do love live Q&A. And I have also thought about creating like a group kind of ongoing situation where I would maybe do more live Q&As as well. So I'm really trying to figure out where to put my energy in as this year unfolds. So that might be something to think of, for me to think about as well. Great interaction, especially if we were staying home. It's nice to talk to others, absolutely. Feels really lovely and supportive to me, but I really like all forms of videos. Is there any chance you may still have time to talk about feeling safe? Yes, for the closing thing, I'm thinking that you're talking about, Jack, that Isabel recommended or suggested or asked, I guess I should say. I am going to do just a brief closing thing and before we get off. Sharia is saying, yes, I wouldn't have shared probably if Natalie hadn't. See, that is the power of, get a chill there. That is the power of vulnerability. When you show up in a vulnerable place, not only is that beneficial to you, as long as you're doing it in a way that's safe, not only is that beneficial to you, but it can be beneficial to other people as well. Yes, 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 yes. Okay, so thank you everybody for joining me, and I am going to do just a brief little kind of grounding experience together as we end today. So keep a watch out. If you are on social media, please follow me on Facebook, Peggy Oliveira, my public profile page. It's a black and white picture. On Instagram, I don't interact as much on Instagram, but you can find me on Instagram as well. I share there all the things that I'm going to be doing. Also, if you haven't signed up for my newsletter, you can go to my website, courageousjourneys.com, and right there on the homepage is a place to sign up for my newsletter. And you'll also get a little PDF thing on using affirmations in a way that work, with some specific affirmations. But I'll be sharing what's coming up. I'm going to be releasing an audio version of my book, Deeply Rooted. So I'll be sharing that information as well. And I'll be asking for feedback about kind of which direction to go as I consider various options. So make sure that you're connected with me, ideally somewhere beyond YouTube, because YouTube is for videos, and if I'm not doing a video sharing something, then you're likely not going to see it. I do share in the other part, there's a community section, I think. I share things in there sometimes, but I don't know that, I don't think that most people will actually see that. So make sure that you connect with me in another way, newsletter or social media, whatever feels best for you. Hi, Ella, came in late again. Sorry about that, but you can definitely watch on replay and feel free to leave comments as well. It's great seeing you live and helpful hearing from everyone. Yeah, I think there's a lot of benefit in that for sure. Oh, I'm sorry you've had a difficult weekend. Well, stay tuned. So yes, the Q&A part kind of is over, but I'm going to do a little bit of a grounding experience. So stay with us. And really, so Facebook isn't going to be happy about me saying this. I know a lot of you are not on social media, and I get it. But there have been people that have created a Facebook account not acknowledging, not connecting it to a personal account. And they've done it for different reasons. A lot of people don't want people to know that they're following somebody who talks about trauma. But a lot of people have done that so that they can still engage and be present in that, because I do lives there sometimes. I share things kind of just spontaneously. So feel free to check me out over there. Self-care tips for people like teachers. I'm going to make a note of that. You know, and as I'm writing that, I'm actually thinking about people kind of in a realm of serving others, teachers, and I'm a social worker, so I think about that a lot, another very undervalued profession. Even like people on the front lines and stuff like that, nurses, people that are basically taking care of other people. So yeah, I might specifically address that. Thank you for that. To get topics addressed for people to share things they normally wouldn't. Yes, absolutely. And as one person mentions something, it can spur something in somebody else, which is also a great thing about the live interaction. So I definitely will continue that in some capacity. I had been doing some lives on Facebook more frequently before I was doing the lives here as regularly. So I don't, like I said, I'm going to kind of play around with the ideas and see what comes up. But feel free to reach out if you've got thoughts you'd like to share with me. You can email me at healing@courageousjourneys.com as well. Okay, so feeling safe. Let's ground in together. There were a lot of vulnerable things that we talked about today. There's a lot going on in the world, a lot of uncertainty, going back to that idea. So just allowing yourself to feel into that sense of safety that is here in this moment, that it's saying that there are 19 of us here, and everybody here has been welcoming and supportive and vulnerable in sharing and supporting one another. And there's been several times of some aspect of me too, right? None of us are alone in what we're struggling with, whatever that is. None of us are alone. And so feeling the energy of this space and these people from all over the globe in this moment in time, being together because of what we have in common. And in this space and in this moment, we are safe, we are accepted, we are supported. Whatever you think, whatever you feel, whatever you fear, there is no judgment, only acceptance, only support and connection. We are never alone. Feeling either your feet on the floor or your seat on the surface below you, feeling the weight sink down into the surface and below into the ground. Imagining the energy and the roots spreading out and connecting with the roots of the other people that are here present in this moment. Imagining all of that connecting to one another, feeling that connection and that sturdiness, that rootedness as we become one. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for supporting this channel. Thank you for supporting me. If you haven't subscribed, please do. If there's somebody that you think might benefit from this channel, I know it might feel a little uncomfortable, and it's okay if you don't want to because you don't want people to know, but I would appreciate. I'm working on expanding this year. So if there's somebody that you think might benefit from this channel and what I do, if it feels comfortable to you to do so, please consider sharing. So, love live Q&A. Zoom group. Yes, Lou. I am still feeling into that. I love that. Like, I really want to recreate, well, not that specific one, but I want more of that. Like, I want to facilitate more of that for sure. Thank you all for being here. So just for reference for that Zoom group thing, and what I want to recreate was a 3.5 hour workshop that I did on Deeply Rooted. It was beautiful. Vulnerability. I thought it was absolutely amazing. I loved it. And I'm trying to figure out, what is that going to look like? Is it going to be a workshop? Is it going to be a group? What is it going to be? I don't know. But I'm going to do something because I want more of that. I want that kind of intimacy. I want that kind of connection. I want to be able to see your faces as we work on this. I'm so glad that it feels relaxing. Watch another video. There are a lot. And for those of you who may not know, I also have a meditation album that I did that you can find on my website. Actually, when this ends, I will share a link to that. So it's got 4 meditations on it. So I will share that when I get off here. Support group, thumbs up. Yes. So I will look forward to connecting with you again very soon. So stay tuned and I will let you know what's going to be coming up. Have a great rest of your week and a good weekend. Bye, everybody.